Standard American diet quadruples the cancer rate. Do you hear that?
Yeah.
Quadruples. The
Wow.
SAD, Standard American Diet, is not only sad, it's dangerous. Not only
Mhm.
does it quadruple cancer rate, it also impacts your cardiovascular health, your longevity, diabetes, every component, obesity of your life.
Hey there. Welcome to the Evolving Ageless podcast. This is the enlightened woman's antidote to aging. So, I'm your host, Michelle Dreilich, and as you know, I am on a mission to change the way women age. So, each week I'm joined by experts sharing the latest and greatest in their fields. They're helping us live an ageless lifestyle, and this week is no different. So, by the time we're seeing this, it is October. So summer's over, not here in Florida, obviously. We're winding it down, but summer's over in most of the country. The kids are definitely back in school, and that's in full swing. Leaves are changing, right? But I think for most women, we identify October with Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And I know there's a huge political connotation around this particular time of year. Some women love the idea of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, some women are appalled by it. And where I fall on that is anything that brings awareness to a disease that's taking the lives of women day after day, when however we bring awareness to it is important. So I am so excited to have my guest today join us. Um, so we are going to talk about breast cancer awareness from the very beginning of the journey all the way through till after treatment and beyond. My guest today is Dr. Carol Lourie. Some of you may have heard of her. She practices out of Berkeley. She's a practitioner with over 3 decades. That's 30 years of clinical experience as a naturopath, an acupuncturist. She's a homeopath. She has helped thousands of women recover their health and restore their lives with so many holistic protocols that she's developed through all of that experience with naturopathy and acupuncture and homeopathy combined. She's very targeted with her nutrition recommendations, supplementation, changes that women need to make in their lifestyle. And also including mindset, right? That the way we think about things is so important. And so I am so excited to welcome Dr. Carol Lourie onto Evolving Ageless. Good morning, Dr. Carol. How are you?
I'm so happy to be here, and it's really an honor to be here with you and your audience. Can't wait to share everything with you and them.
Oh, it's exciting. And so I want to just disclose right up front, Carol's one of my dearest friends. We have been through thick and thin together. She's a mentor of mine. And really, when it comes to disease prevention and care, and I go to Carol first. Just
Wow.
a wealth of information. And so I'm excited for us to dig in because this topic is so, it touches all of us as women, right? With the statistics of 1 in 8 or 1 in 9 women with breast cancer, it's impossible for us to not know someone, whether that's someone in our family or a dear friend. Or a coworker that has struggled or suffered with breast cancer. So let's start off. I mean, let us know, tell us what the newest statistics are, right? Because it's so often misquoted but I just want everyone to understand what we're talking about when we talk about newly diagnosed breast cancer and women living with the history of breast cancer, all of that.
Wonderful. So, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. The statistic of 1 in 8, it's 1 in 8 or up to 13% of women will be diagnosed with breast cancer
Wow.
in their lifetime. And within the US, that translates to 3.8 million women within the last 5 years having had breast cancer. And in the world, that number becomes 7.8 million within the last 5 years.
Wow.
So the scope of the problem of breast cancer is not diminishing. And I know there's a huge focus of everyone about the coronavirus. But the reality of it is, breast cancer has been with us and continues to be with us as a major health crisis. And the good news is, from my perspective, there is an enormous amount of control that you have from the minute that you're first diagnosed. If you're fortunate, you find someone such as myself, because there is a lot that we can do to reduce chemotherapy side effects to prepare you for chemotherapy. For example, you don't want to eat a steak today and go to chemotherapy tomorrow and think that you're not going to be sick, because you will be. There is science backed research that shows intermittent fasting is a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful tool to do, to use. And I want to share a story of when I was first introduced personally to breast cancer. A dear friend of mine was diagnosed. And up to that point, I knew about breast cancer as a naturopath. I had heard about it, I had studied a little bit, but it hadn't become a personal experience to me until one day the phone rang and I thought it was a fake call, but it was my friend, hysterical on the phone, saying the four words no woman wants to hear is, "I have breast cancer." And in that moment, I said to her, "Don't worry, I'm going to be with you. You're not going to be alone." So the first time we went to UCSF for her infusion, the minute we walked in, they said to her, "Well, you look a little thin. Would you like some Ensure?" So Ensure, the number one ingredient is glucose. Within 15 minutes of starting her chemotherapy, they offered her a drink that had sugar in it. Halfway through, they offered her a popsicle, then a lollipop, and at the end, a congratulatory cookie or muffin. 5 times they offered her sugar. Now, this is a very well established fact that a German scientist in 1918 discovered that cancer, given a choice between glucose and oxygen for its cancer gas tank, will choose glucose for energy, even though it gives it much less ATP or energy, and it has to work much harder for that pathway. That's known as aerobic glycolysis. So that's the foundation for for the fact cancer is a metabolic disease. So every time you eat sugar, here you are getting chemotherapy to kill the cancer cells, and they're offering the women sugar. You're feeding the cancer gas tank. So that's just one of the eye-opening moments that I had accompanied my friend through her 18 months of treatment.
Wow. And I've heard that before. I'm sure all of us in the audience share this idea that we've heard different quotes and statistics or ideas about cancer, specifically breast cancer, because it's very often hormonally driven, and the idea that sugar feeds cancer, right, and is not foreign. And I don't want anyone to think that that means that you gave yourself cancer in any
No,
way.
of
That's
course not.
not what we're implying. But what I love about what you're saying here is for two things that we just kind of implied that we didn't touch on, which is you're talking about women getting chemotherapy and their treatment plan. And so I think a lot of people out there feel like if they're diagnosed with something as severe as breast cancer, that it means that they can't pursue kind of a more holistic or integrative approach to their well-being. So what I loved about what you just said was alongside of,
In
right?
addition
Like
to,
in
right.
addition to. So that's eye-opening, right? So you work with women in a way that they continue to work with their oncologist. You're
Absolutely.
not telling them, because there's a lot of people out there that are saying, don't pursue
No,
conventional treatment of any kind. And while that may be okay for some, um, you
not
know,
my approach.
it's
I
not.
believe in taking the best of both worlds. And
Yeah.
there are moments, thank goodness for allopathic or regular medicine. I'm a firm believer in taking the best of both worlds and using science-based information for your
Mhm.
chemotherapy or surgery treatment, and then applying that same skill set to your integrative care, because these protocols that I've developed are science backed. It's not like, oh, I think I'm going to use a little bit of this fairy dust.
Yeah.
Everything has references. And I'm often brought in as part of the oncology team. And I think when you have a serious disease such as breast cancer, you need a team approach to get through it in as good health as possible. And that is a unique concept. When
Mhm.
I've said to women, you can be in actually better health when you're done with treatment than you were at the beginning, they look at me like, what is she talking about?
I know. It falls on our ears in a very skeptical way, but absolutely when women are learning better ways of nourishing their bodies and giving themselves the self-care aspect of being mindful of their sleep and their stress and its impact on your body, you really are able to make changes that have a significant impact even afterward. I loved what you said also about your friend and realizing within the first, you know, day of her chemotherapy that that's a really common um process, right?
Oh,
Like I think as women we learn very young, your first boyfriend breakup, you eat a pint of ice cream with your mom, like it's a rite of passage. We joke, but we all kind of soothe with comfort food, right? And the idea behind meaning well in a chemotherapy center where they want women to feel comfortable and soothed and
mhm.
happy, they're giving them comfort food, but with the knowledge and the understanding of a glucose and its relationship, sugar and its relationship to cancer, it's probably not a smart idea
No.
while you're attacking cancer cells.
Right. So when we showed up, we had a whole bag. We had our herbal tea, we had our Beeler's broth, we had our miso soup. We'd lay everything out. We had our homeopathic remedies, and the nurses started coming around and saying, "Well, how are you feeling? Oh, you're not sick. Why aren't you sick? You look so good. What's healthy? You look so healthy." And
Mm.
we started getting everybody really interested. And one day in the oncology office with her doctor's appointment, the doctor looked at her blood work and looked up at us and said, "I don't know what you're doing, but I want all of my patients to do it too, because your blood work is that of a person who's not in the middle of chemotherapy. No anemia, no depressed white cell count." I
Mhm.
mean, she looked great.
Yeah.
And, women started coming. She started referring people to me, women to me, and a large part of my clinical practice began to focus on providing these important tools during, after, and then recovering your health and preventing recurrence. There's the 3 phases, which are really
Mhm.
important and very distinct.
I love that. And the idea that I don't know that most people think about this, but when a woman is undergoing chemotherapy, right, her doctor, their goal is to keep you as healthy as possible, right? Because very often they have a certain number of doses and a certain timing with the way cancer cells multiply and divide, that they want to deliver the right dose of that chemotherapy to
Mhm.
interrupt that
Cell
division
cycle.
and cell
Right.
cycle. Yeah, yeah. And so if a woman is delayed, which cycles, my background, I worked in oncology for a decade, and that cycle, if it has to be delayed, that gives the cancer time to recover from the previous chemotherapy, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so staying healthy during chemotherapy has massive benefit
It does.
if someone can undergo the treatment plan in the time and the order, it's ideal. So that's amazing. Okay, so that's the first part of the journey, right? Like diagnosis, your first, getting through chemotherapy or during chemotherapy, right? So what comes next? What's the next phase?
Well, I just want to back up for a second,
Yeah.
because there's often this big pressure once there's a diagnosis and you have your biopsy. Oh, you have to start chemotherapy tomorrow. And
Mhm.
I feel like your breast cancer didn't develop overnight,
Yeah.
and there are going to be a lot of changes that happen in your life. So take a week or two. Maybe you need
Mhm.
a second opinion.
Mm.
You need to get together your care team, because when you think
Mm.
about the 8 million things we do as women to for our lives and the lives of our household, you're not going to be able to do those 8 million things, and you're going to need help. If you
Mhm.
have children, you're going to need pickup and drop off care and food care for yourself. I mean, often the spouses are well meaning, but they're not adept or they don't know how. And so you're going to need to create a Google Sheet and get one of your dear friends to organize all the things that you can't do, as well as putting together a care team. Of course, there's going to be your oncology people, but then maybe you're going to get acupuncture. You're going to have someone such as myself guiding you. I mean, the time that you spend preparing for chemotherapy is some of the most important time of your life, especially if you're then going for neoadjuvant chemotherapy, in which it shrinks the size of the tumor before they want to do surgery. And I've had
Mhm.
women initially, their doctors have wanted to do a mastectomy because the tumor was so large. But between what they did with her chemotherapy and what she did with me, she was able to have a lumpectomy. And that is a
Mhm.
huge difference in her life.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, we have that beginning preparing for chemo, getting through chemo, and then recovering your health from the chemo. And then really making an informed decision about radiation and understanding that um, we have to take the best of both worlds, but often the radiation oncologist will not tell you about some of the pretty intense side effects from radiation.
Mhm.
So I have a whole chapter in my online program about radiation, and here are the statistics. And you need to go in and talk to your radiation oncologist about that
Mhm.
before you make your decision.
And you provide things that you can do to prepare for that, right?
Mhm.
So
Right.
even just talking about preparation, I think all of us, our first inclination is like, get it out, just get it out, right? So whatever you want to do it tomorrow, let's do it tomorrow. But I love what you're saying is like, take a deep breath, take a step back, and allow yourself a little space to organize, think things through, and I can see that that will have a different impact on our stress level, right? That we're not just throwing ourselves into a process that, I mean, honestly, it's a whirlwind.
It
I've
is.
been a part of it with people close to me, and it's a whirlwind, and it comes in waves, and it's almost never ending. You can't catch your breath. So I love that. Okay, so during treatment, one of the things you led in with that I loved, and I knew we're going to get to it in a minute, when you said don't eat a steak and then have chemotherapy the next day, right? So that's just one of the many things that you talk about, but I've heard you speak about preparing the body for chemotherapy in the
Mhm.
couple of days. It's like 2 or 3 days before,
Right.
and that's part of what you work with women on, and it's individualized, right? Different women have a different need going into chemotherapy. But so do you want to talk a little bit about during chemotherapy, how you
Sure.
support women and what they should focus on then?
Sure. First of all, the women I work with are on something called a healing smoothie every day, which
Yeah.
has either whey or pea isolate or ketogenic protein powder as a base. And then we put a lot of antioxidants in it and we put some other herbs in it, and it tastes really good. It doesn't taste bad. So we have to we have to remove some of those products because I'm into respecting chemotherapy. There are
Mhm.
certain herbs which really actually augment chemotherapy, such as ashwagandha. There's research how it improves the impact of chemotherapy. We want to focus on that. And then we want
Mhm.
to take away certain antioxidants
Right.
before chemo. And we do that, a lot of times the doctors will say no herbs, no vitamins, nothing while you're on chemo. And that comes from a place of uneducation because there is a huge amount of benefit that this work does. So we want to respect chemo. So 2 or 3 days before, we eliminate certain products, and 2 or 3 days afterwards. But so you're still getting within that 3 week cycle, you're still getting 2 weeks, a little bit more than 2 weeks of all the good stuff, which help
Mhm.
your blood cells, which help the white count, which keep you from being anemic. It's a really impactful protocol. And then we stop taking certain supplements around the chemotherapy infusion time. And
Mhm.
then the other component of this is intermittent fasting. So you don't want to eat a steak and go for chemo and think and be surprised if you get nauseous. You're going to get sick.
Mm.
The science behind fasting is when you fast, the healthy cells go into protective mode. And the cancer cells, they need more energy. So they're like going around looking for glucose and saying, where's the energy? Where's the energy? They get hungry. So when you fast, and the best time is 14 to 16 hours, it's not that long.
No.
And then you go into chemo and you're fasting, and they give you part of the infusion is you get glucose, and you get a steroid to
Mhm.
reduce the side effects of the nausea. And that those cancer cells go, oh, thank goodness, here's food. And they grab up that medication with the chemotherapy. So the chemotherapy is able to attack them at a higher percentage while your healthy cells are protected. And that's all been, there's lots of research in PubMed. Walter Longo, Bongiorno is a big research person for this. It's been thoroughly studied. And
Oh
so
my
this is a
god.
really simple thing. This is
I
an
have
empowered
goosebumps
approach.
right now. Like, I don't know if you can see them. I have goosebumps right now
I
because
love this. I mean,
yeah,
it's
what you just shared is so powerful. Like, if anyone listening to this has a friend that's undergoing chemotherapy, this segment right there alone makes a difference. I've read the book, The Longevity Diet by
yeah.
Walter Longo.
Mhm.
Walter Longo's featured in it. The work that he's done and the way it's described so beautifully is if you've got two armies in a war, right? And they speak different languages, fasting before chemotherapy is like telling one army in their language to duck and cover. And it's like, it's just the other army
Right.
standing there exposed,
Right. Here I
right?
am. Come
Here I
get me.
am, come get me. And then the chemotherapy can be so much more effective. And again, the healthy cells are hunkered down, they're shielded
Mhm.
during that process. So there's less damage to your body, but also afterward, they're healthy.
Yeah,
They
they perk
remain
right up. Yeah.
healthy. Yeah.
So simple. Such
So,
a
but girl,
simple. I don't know
we've
why
been
they don't
friends
do
for
this.
so long and we've even talked about this stuff, but when you say it like like that, the last 5 minutes could change someone's life.
You could.
Like, it's a big deal. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And it's not expensive. It doesn't cost any
No,
money to
not
do that.
eating is cheap. That's great.
Right.
So,
Mhm.
and fasting for 14 or 16 hours, I mean, that's just a little bit longer than you sleep, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
it's not a huge difference. So what great ideas for women. So now we've talked about like, okay, you support women in a certain way when they're first diagnosed and preparing them and getting their bodies ready and so that they can kind of skate through it. And I hate to sound so flippant about it, but I know the people that you work with kind of skate through it.
They do skate
Um,
through it. They
yeah,
they sort of skim
I love
through
it.
it. It's like, "Oh, it wasn't that bad. What's everybody complaining about?" So,
Yeah,
it's because you're doing the
yeah,
protocol.
yeah. And it's all, I mean, yeah. So then when women are in therapy, there's a whole different, like you just said, you change the smoothie around because you don't
Right.
want to give antioxidants along with chemotherapy because chemotherapy works a lot of the time using oxidative stress. It's the
Right.
stress of the chemotherapy, right? So you don't want to dampen it with vitamin C or vitamin A. That would counteract it, and you don't want to do that. So that's really, there are probably women out there that are taking vitamin C and vitamin A and
Yeah.
don't even know that they're
It's
working against
unfortunate.
their chemotherapy. So you definitely don't want to do that. But now there's this other interesting time because I've heard you talk about this a lot. This idea of ringing the bell, right? So when a woman finishes her treatment, it's a celebration and it should be because that's no small feat, right? And so very often they ring a bell and everyone in the cancer center knows it's their last trip through the infusion
Chemo
center.
or radiation, right.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's a powerful moment, but it's also a great time to pay attention to what's going on, right? So I've heard you talk about it. Why don't you tell us about after the bell's rung, what happens?
Well, it is a celebration because it has been a very arduous journey. And actually, then I feel is where the real work really begins.
Mhm.
Because there is unfortunately a misnomer of, okay, you're done. You've had your treatment. There's no evidence of disease. But cancer is a metabolic disease, which means we have to address the driving components of what created your cancer. And that's part one. And the other part of ringing the bell is most women do not feel well after they've finished their treatment. It's even under the best of circumstances, it's very disruptive to the physiology of your body and your life. You might have had surgery. There's these physical changes to adjust to, and it's impacted your ability for intimacy. And then all of a sudden, your family and your coworkers and your friends and your colleagues think, "Oh, she's done. She's going to go back to being her normal self." And I've had women say this to me all the time. They expect me to be normal like I was, but I'm not that person, and I still feel horrible. And then all of a sudden, I feel like my oncologist has disappeared off the face of the earth. And one woman said to me, I know this sounds strange, but I actually liked going for radiation every day because it made me feel I was doing something to kill my cancer. So there's a huge amount of emotional changes happening as well as physical changes. And nobody is like, it's the elephant in the room. And I talk about that in my free class. There's a big elephant in the room. So I'm not into the elephant in the room. I think the room should be beautiful and clear and free flowing. And I think all of these little different topics need to be really addressed. And I want to start with how it's important to recover from radiation, because I've had women come to see me literally 10 years post treatment and they've turned into the couch potato. And that's no judgment. If you don't feel well, you can't get up and move, because radiation creates a lot of oxidative stress. And if it's not attended to in the beginning, which is really easy to do, it can follow you for your life and really diminish the quality of your life. So you've been through treatment. Now it's, my job to help you really understand what's happened with treatment and what do we need to do to help your health, your body recover, and then also to make your body inhospitable to cancer regrowth, because cancer is a metabolic disease. And not that means that you have like these little aberrant cancer cells and they get sort of audacious and they think, oh, I'm going to call the neighbor and get the neighbor to come over and make a tumor, or I'm going to call over to another part of your body and get them to start having cancer. We can impact the cancer's ability to call with the cell phone, so to speak, cell signaling, by changing the environment in your body and disrupting those cells. That's called attending to the tumor microenvironment. And that is the power that women have through changing what they eat, taking certain supplements, changing their lifestyle, and living a healthy, ageless life. That is your power. And that is a beautiful thing.
It is a beautiful thing. And it falls right into line with everything we talk about on Evolving Ageless, right? Which is we control more about what happens to us than we know.
Yeah.
Right. And in many ways, when we say, when you say cancer is a metabolic disease, that means it's not lightning striking. Right. There's an environment that has set itself up, and your genes play a role very often in that. And sometimes they don't. But the point, and we've talked about that on so many different shows about epigenetics. Right. And so the idea that it's an active participating disease, it doesn't just show up.
Right.
It's fed and it lives. And so how we approach that is that we need to essentially choke its food supply, right? We need to keep it from being able to thrive. And the microenvironment I love, because that's what I mean. I've heard you say this before, so I'm not going to say it because I want you to say it because it is so powerful. But what do women say after they've rung the bell? What do they tell you when they first talk to you at the end of treatment?
Well, there's no one thing. I mean, it goes across the board. I'm so happy I'm done, but now I can't sleep at night because I'm worried it's going to come back. And that is the number one concern. I asked my community of over 10,000 women, what's your number one concern since you were initially diagnosed? So from the minute of being diagnosed, the first thing women are thinking about is, I don't want it to come back. So, because they're aware of that. Because it is, I mean, they're not phrasing it, it's a metabolic disease, but they think, oh, it's going to come back. What am I going to do? And there's a lot you can do to lower the curve, lower those statistics, because the statistics are daunting. Within the first 5 years, up to 13% of women will have a recurrence. And
Mm.
guess what? I think that if you do this work, you can get those statistics better. So you don't have to be in that
Mhm.
bell curve. You want to be an outlier from that bell curve.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that it's possible, right? Because
Mhm.
statistics really represent the average of what's going on. So there are people on the upper end of living a really, you know, challenging lifestyle, I know alcohol is one of those things, right? Like,
Alcohol, the standard American diet quadruples the cancer rate. Do you hear that?
yeah,
Quadruples. The
wow.
SAD, standard American diet, is not only sad, it's dangerous. Not only
Mhm,
does it quadruple cancer rate, it also impacts your cardiovascular health, your longevity, diabetes, every component, obesity of your life. So those statistics of up to the 13% are for obese Americans eating the standard American diet. And if you put yourself out of that, make some changes. It's not that hard. It takes a while, changing your lifestyle, changing how you approach what you bring into your home as far as
mhm.
toxins and chemicals and organic food takes a while. And
Yeah.
people always say to me, oh, it's too expensive. Well, I'll tell you a story. I had a woman come to see me. She had unexplained infertility. And I love it when somebody has an unexplained diagnosis because it means that we just haven't done the right testing. And she had a lot of scent. And I said to her, so tell me about you and scents. She goes, oh, I love scents. I go, what's that mean? She goes, I have the plugins, I have those little things that stick in oil. And here's the killer for me. I spray my sofa with that thing that you spray your sofa with, and the hair is standing up on top of my head. And I'm going, okay, well, when you go home, can you please take every single home health product that you're using and all your body care and put them on the counter and take a photo? 29 items in there. And I said to her, you don't have unexplained infertility. You have toxic overload, which is keeping you from getting pregnant. And she had to throw out her couch because we couldn't detoxify it from the chemicals that she was spraying. Now, I should explain, and I know your audience, I'm sure, is very familiar, but when you use those chemicals in the dryer sheets, in the laundry, when you wash your dishes with these, they get into your skin, and your skin is your largest organ. When you get
Mhm.
out of the shower, your pores are open and you're wrapping your body in a towel that's been exposed to these chemicals in the dryer sheets. They're called estrogen disruptors. And those estrogen disruptors inhibit healthy estrogen from being properly eliminated in your body. So when it comes time for it to be excreted, the spot that it binds to is being taken up by those estrogen mimicking chemicals. And that causes a healthy, normal estrogen to turn into an unhealthy form of itself, estrone, which leads to polycystic ovarian syndrome, infertility, and breast cancer and other cancers. So just changing what you bring into your home
Mm.
and eliminating those products is one of the really impactful ways women can really attend to their health. And the nice story about this is 3 months after working with me, she didn't have unexplained infertility. She now has 3 babies. She was pregnant and she was about
Wow.
to spend $40,000 on IVF unnecessarily because it wouldn't have worked
Yeah.
because we
Yeah.
weren't dealing with the root cause of her problem.
Right. And to your point, and the relationship between that and breast cancer is, again, they're hormone mimickers, right?
Hormones.
So they play around with our hormones, and it could, for her, it presented as infertility, right? But in other women, it very often, after a large time, could present as cancer. And so
Yes.
so here's what I love. So Carol always has online free classes so that women can learn more about the best ways to care for themselves through these phases of breast cancer. And I know for October, you're really focused on empowering women against recurrence, right? So
Mhm.
that's the name of your class, right? I don't want it to come back. Empowered against recurrence, which I think is just a brilliant message that women can identify with when they've been through this cancer journey. And so the dates, I think there's a October 14th and 15th.
Mhm.
right? And we're going to
Yes.
attach a link. There'll be a link here. There'll be a link in the email that we send out. If you're not on our email list, go to agelesslx.com or evolvingageless.com and get on our list. And we'll make sure that you'll receive this, but it's also in our show notes. We'll send a link so that you can register for Carol's upcoming new Empowered Against Recurrence class. I've sat in on it 3 times because well, you're my dear friend, but I think it's such an important story, and I think, we would be remiss if we talked about living ageless and we didn't touch on ways to help women prevent this horrific disease,
Mhm. Mhm.
and then put the tools in their hands to keep it from coming back.
And the good news
So
is if you can't watch when I'm one of the times that I'm giving the free class, just sign up because you'll get an email with a replay, and then you can watch it at any time that you want.
and you can share it with women in your life
Mhm.
that
Everyone
that
knows
need to
someone.
hear this message. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's so important. And I have to say, what you see is what you get. Like, Carol wakes up in the morning thinking about how she can help women with breast cancer and puts her head on her pillow at night
It's true.
thinking of ways she can help women with breast cancer. And I know that because I've been on the phone with you when you wake up, and I've been on the phone with you when
That's
we both put our
true.
heads on our pillow. So, thank you, Dr. Carol Lourie, so much for joining today on Evolving Ageless and for helping women uh, with breast cancer from the beginning of their journey all the way through. And these tenets work at preventing breast cancer too. So
Absolutely.
I think they're all just relevant for all of us. So thank you so much for sharing
Thank you for having
everything
me.
you
It's
know.
so great to be here.
Yeah. So don't miss out on Empowered Against Recurrence. I don't want it to come back. The class, October 14th and 15th. Follow the link. It's so, so important. Share this with everyone that needs to hear this message. And so join me again next week because I'm going to be here with another expert as we dive deeper into what is working to help us live an ageless life from within. That's all I have. It's so great to spend time with you guys. I absolutely adore every single person and really value your thoughts and opinions. Always feel free to reach out through email or on Facebook and just let me know what you'd love to hear us talk about and other experts you'd love to hear from. In the meantime, have a wonderful week. Bye for now.